They think I ended up in the hospital because of work, because of stress, because I pushed myself too hard. But that's not the truth. The truth is, love did this to me, not the kind that comforts you. The kind that exposes everything you've been running from. Her love didn't hurt me because it was weak. It hurt because it was real. It forced me to stop, to feel, to face the part of myself I kept ignoring. Lying there, unable to move, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't scared of losing my empire. I was scared of losing her, and that moment, that hospital bed, changed my life forever. The room was white. Two white walls, white sheets, white lights humming softly above my head. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, trapped somewhere between exhaustion and unconsciousness. My body felt heavy, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Every breath reminded me that I had pushed past a limit I didn't even know existed. People would later say it was stress, overwork, burnout. That answer was easy, comfortable, acceptable, but it wasn't the truth. The truth was much harder to admit. I remember opening my eyes slowly, the sound of machines beeping beside me, measuring things I had ignored for years: heart rate, oxygen, stability. A nurse noticed I was awake and gently told me not to move. Her voice was calm, practiced. This wasn't new to her, but it was new to me. I had built rockets, companies, futures. I had slept on factory floors and survived months that felt impossible. And yet, there I was, flat on my back, unable to stand, unable to argue, unable to escape. For the first time in my life, I had been forced to stop. And the first thought that hit me wasn't about work. It wasn't about deadlines. It wasn't even about survival. It was you. That realization scared me more than the hospital itself. I closed my eyes again, not because I was tired, but because memories started flooding in, conversations I had rushed through, moments I had postponed, feelings I had pushed aside because they didn't fit into my schedule. You had warned me, not angrily, not dramatically, just honestly. You can't keep doing this to yourself. You had said once, your voice steady but worried. You don't listen to your body or your heart. I brushed it off like I brushed off everything that slowed me down. I'm fine, I had replied. I always am. That lie followed me all the way into that hospital bed. As the minutes passed, the reality settled in. My body hadn't failed me. It had protected me. It shut me down when my mind refused to. And suddenly, I understood something painful. Your love hadn't weakened me. It had exposed me. I remembered the way you looked at me when I canceled plans, again. The way you never complained, but your eyes quietly asked, when will you choose yourself? When will you choose us? I had no answer then, and now I was paying for it. A doctor came in later, explaining what had happened in clinical terms: exhaustion, strain, warning signs ignored for too long. I nodded, listening like I always did, analyzing information. But none of it hit as hard as the thought that kept repeating in my mind. What if I had lost you before realizing this? I turned my head slightly and noticed my phone on the side table. Notifications filled the screen, messages, missed calls, responsibilities waiting patiently to reclaim me. And then, your name, unread. My chest tightened in a way no machine could measure. I realized something then, lying helpless and stripped of control. I had spent my life preparing for failure in business, but never prepared for failure in love. You weren't asking me to slow down because you wanted less of me. You were asking because you wanted me alive, present, human. The irony hurt. The stronger I tried to be, the more fragile I became. And in that quiet hospital room, with nothing left to distract me, I faced a truth I had avoided for years. Success means nothing if the people you love are watching you disappear. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how long recovery would take. I didn't know if I could truly change. But I knew this much with terrifying clarity. If I walked out of that hospital the same person who walked in, I would lose you. And that loss would be permanent. So as I stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady beat beside me, I made a decision, not a public one, not a dramatic one, but a real one. If love was strong enough to break me, then maybe it was strong enough to rebuild me too. And this time, I wasn't going to ignore the warning. When they finally allowed visitors, I expected noise, questions, concern wrapped in panic. That's how people usually react when they see someone like me lying still, vulnerable, stripped of momentum. But when you walked in, there was silence, not the awkward kind, the kind that understands. You stood near the door for a moment, like you weren't sure whether to come closer, not because you were afraid of me, but because you were afraid for me. And that hurt more than any physical pain I felt. You didn't rush to my side. You didn't lecture me. You didn't say, "I told you so." You just looked at me. And in that look, I saw everything I had ignored, the nights you waited, the messages you didn't send, the worry you carried quietly so I wouldn't feel pressured. I tried to sit up, instinctively wanting to look strong. The machine beside me protested immediately, its steady rhythm turning sharp for a second. You moved without thinking, your hand lifting slightly, stopping me. "Don't," you said softly, not commanding. Protective, and for the first time in my life, I listened. You sat beside the bed, close enough that I could feel your presence without you touching me. That distance said more than closeness ever could. I was scared, you finally admitted, not angry, not dramatic, just honest. "I know," I replied quietly. You shook your head. "No, you don't." That's when I realized something terrifying. I had underestimated the weight of loving someone like me. You weren't afraid of losing comfort. You weren't afraid of instability. You were afraid of losing me, slowly, piece by piece, to a life that never stops asking for more. I didn't fall for your work, you continued. I didn't fall for your ambition. You looked at me then, eyes steady. I fell for the man who shows up when the world isn't watching. That sentence stayed with me, because that man, I had been neglecting him too. I turned my head slightly, staring at the ceiling again, not to avoid you, but to hold myself together. I thought I was being strong, I said. You were being distant, you replied, not cruel, just true. And truth, I was learning, hurts more when it's accurate. I kept thinking I could push through everything, I admitted. That stopping meant failing. You leaned forward slightly, and what did pushing through get you? I gestured weakly around the room. Exactly. You sighed softly. I never wanted to slow you down, you said. I just wanted you to survive your own dreams. That hit harder than any diagnosis, because suddenly the hospital wasn't a symbol of weakness. It was a checkpoint, a warning I couldn't ignore anymore. I don't need you to choose me over your purpose, you added. I just need you to stop choosing your purpose over your life. I finally looked at you fully. And if I don't know how, I asked, you didn't hesitate, then learn with me. Those words carried no pressure, just partnership. That's when I understood something crucial. Love wasn't the thing that put me in that bed. Love was the thing sitting beside it, refusing to leave. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to impress you, protect you, or lead the moment. I just had to be present, and presence was harder than productivity. But it felt real. As you stood to leave, you paused at the door and turned back. I'm not asking you to change overnight, you said. I'm asking you not to ignore the lesson. I nodded slowly. I won't. And for the first time, I meant it. Because lying there, listening to my own heartbeat echo in a quiet room, I finally understood the truth. Love didn't send me to the hospital. Love followed me there to make sure I came back alive. The doctors called it recovery. Rest, monitoring, adjustment. They made it sound clinical, controlled, but no one warned me about the silence. Recovery wasn't dramatic like collapse. There were no alarms, no rush, no urgency, just time. And time is dangerous when you've spent your entire life running from it. The first night after you left, the room felt unbearably large. Machines hummed softly, nurses passed occasionally, but the real noise was inside my head. Thoughts I'd buried under deadlines and pressure had nowhere left to hide. I replayed your words over and over. I just wanted you to survive your own dreams. I had always believed dreams were supposed to cost something. Sleep, comfort, relationships. I just never thought they'd cost me. The next morning, the doctor sat across from me, calm but serious. This wasn't random, he said. Your body gave you multiple warnings. Warnings, that word echoed. I thought of the headaches I ignored, the nights I didn't sleep, the way my chest tightened when I was alone, and I convinced myself it was just pressure or weakness. You need to change how you live, the doctor continued. Not temporarily, permanently. I nodded like I always did. But inside, fear crept in, because changing how I lived meant changing how I worked. And changing how I worked meant confronting the one thing I never questioned, that my worth came from output. Later that day, you returned. No rush this time. No hesitation. You brought nothing in your hands. No flowers, no distractions, just yourself. You sat beside me again, closer now. How are you really? You asked. I almost gave you the usual answer. I'm fine, but the hospital had stripped me of that lie. I'm scared, I admitted. Your hand rested gently on the edge of the bed. Of what? Of slowing down, I said. Of discovering who I am without constant motion. You nodded, understanding more than I expected. Stillness forces honesty, you said. That sentence stayed with me. Recovery meant learning limits, physical ones first, walking without rushing, breathing without forcing, sleeping without guilt. Every small act felt unnatural, like I was betraying the version of myself the world expected. But something else started happening too. I noticed things, the rhythm of daylight through the window, the sound of my own breathing when I wasn't controlling it, and most importantly, I noticed you, not worrying, not hovering, just present. You don't have to fix this alone, you reminded me one evening. That was harder to accept than pain, because letting someone help meant admitting I wasn't invincible, and invincibility had been my armor. One night, unable to sleep, I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. What if I fail again? You didn't answer immediately. Then you said, then we pause again. We don't collapse. That distinction mattered. Collapse was uncontrolled. Pause was intentional. For the first time, I saw recovery not as weakness, but as strategy. A different kind of strength. As days passed, my body grew steadier, but the real healing happened elsewhere. I stopped measuring my value by how exhausted I was. I started measuring it by how present I could be. And every time fear whispered that slowing down would cost me everything, you reminded me gently, you already almost lost everything once. By the end of that week, standing near the window, watching the world move without me, I realized something profound. I didn't need to disappear to be powerful. I didn't need to break to prove commitment. Love didn't weaken me. It redefined strength. And as I turned toward you, steady on my feet for the first time in days, I knew the hardest part wasn't collapsing. It was choosing a different way to rise. The day they told me I could finally leave the hospital, the sunlight felt different. Not brighter, just honest. It wasn't welcoming me back to the race. It was asking me a question I had avoided my entire life. How do you plan to live now? I stood near the exit papers, shoes on, body still weak but stable. Doctors spoke, nurses smiled politely, machines were disconnected one by one. It felt symbolic, like layers of protection being removed, leaving only responsibility behind. But the real moment didn't happen with them. It happened when I looked at you. You were standing quietly near the window, not excited, not relieved in an obvious way, just watching me, like you were waiting to see which version of me would walk out. The old one, or someone new. I'm ready, I said. You turned and smiled softly. I know, you replied, but there was something in your eyes, hope mixed with caution. You weren't celebrating yet, and that told me everything. Outside, the world felt loud again, Cars, phones, messages waiting to be answered. My device vibrated almost immediately, reminding me that nothing had paused just because I had. I looked at the screen. Then I turned it face down. You noticed. That simple act, so small, felt heavier than any promise I could make. You don't have to do that, you said gently. I know, I replied. I want to. We walked slowly. Not rushing, not escaping, just moving forward together. I used to think collapse was the enemy, I said, that it meant failure. I glanced at you. Now I realize ignoring the warning was the real failure. You didn't interrupt. You never did when something mattered. I spent my life proving things. I continued to the world, to critics, to myself. I exhaled, but I never proved that I knew how to stay. We stopped for a moment. The city moved around us, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. I don't want to live in a way that almost kills me, I said firmly, and I don't want to love in a way that slowly disappears. You stepped closer. Then don't, you said simply. That was it. No dramatic speech, no pressure, just permission. I'm choosing a different kind of ambition, I told you. One where success includes health, presence, you. Your breath caught slightly. I'm not promising balance every day, I added honestly, but I am promising awareness and honesty when I'm slipping. You looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. That's all I ever wanted, you said. In that moment, I understood the final truth. Love didn't send me to the hospital. Love stopped me from dying the same way twice. As we walked forward, side by side, I felt something unfamiliar but grounding, not urgency, but intention. And for the first time, that felt like real power. Walking away from the hospital wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I finally started telling it honestly. For years, I believed strength meant endurance, pushing through pain, ignoring limits, and sacrificing everything for the future. I wore exhaustion like a badge of honor and called it commitment. But lying in that hospital bed stripped away every illusion I had about control. What I learned was simple, yet painful. You don't lose strength when you stop. You lose it when you refuse to listen. Your love didn't break me. It revealed me. It showed me the cost of a life lived at full speed with no pause. It forced me to see that success without presence is just another form of emptiness. And more importantly, it reminded me that the people who truly care about you don't ask you to burn yourself out. They ask you to stay alive. I didn't walk out healed in every way. I walked out aware. Aware that love is not a distraction from purpose, but a guide back to it. Aware that ambition without health is a slow collapse. Aware that real motivation doesn't push you past your limits. It teaches you where those limits exist. Choosing a different path didn't make me weaker. It made me intentional. And intention, I learned, is far more powerful than speed. If there's one truth this experience left me with, it's this. The bravest thing you can do isn't pushing harder. It's choosing to live in a way that lets you come back tomorrow, present, grounded, and still capable of loving deeply. That's the strength I almost lost, and the strength I'll never ignore again.